In Affliction League, Ralakesh's Impatience got one of the most insane reworks we've seen for a unique item in quite a long time. It went from giving you a lot of bonuses if you stood still, to counting you as having maximum endurance, frenzy, and power charges. And if you've seen some clips of people absolutely melting Uber bosses on some sort of power charge stacker, well, then there's a very good chance Ralakesh's Impatience is involved. So hopefully you'll have enough patience to explore this with me in a little bit more detail. And if you're wondering, do those charge stacker setups that melt Ubers have to be expensive? Well, to take a hit from one, probably, but to do a massive amount of damage? Not currently. But remember, the economy in Path of Exile is constantly changing, skills may get nerfed and items might get reworked, so who knows what the future holds. If you want to know some specifics about the build, then do be sure to get subscribed, leave a like while you're down there, and wait for my upcoming build video. But if you want to know more about how you can incorporate Ralakesh's Impatience into your own build, or just want to see some really cool mechanical interactions, well, let's get right into it. Starting with Ralakesh's Impatience and the stats that it rolls. Now, the Chaos Res, Cold Res, and move speed aren't bad. 30% move speed on boots is kind of a gold standard, but there's hardly any reason to use them for those alone. What is really interesting is count as having maximum number of endurance, frenzy, and power charges. Note the wording there. It says count as having the maximum, not have the maximum. This removes the charge from charge mechanics. For each maximum power charge you could have, you now just have 50% increased critical strike chance. For each maximum endurance charge, you have 4% to all elemental resistances and 4% additional physical damage reduction. And for each frenzy charge, it's 4% increased attack speed, cast speed, and more damage. Because these become static buffs, that makes them very powerful. For example, Malachi's Loop gives you +2 to maximum power charges, but you lose all power charges when reaching your maximum, which is a little bit problematic. If you're getting bonuses from power charges, well, you don't want to lose them, right? With Ralakesh's, this doesn't matter. You don't need to gain them, and you always count as at your maximum. Another cool application of this is the Inner Conviction Keystone. 3% more spell damage per power charge, and gain power charges instead of frenzy charges. So if you were using, let's just say, Inner Conviction, you don't want to use Badge of a Brotherhood and get a bunch of frenzy charges, right? Because you'd never gain them. Well, with Ralakesh's, you can use Inner Conviction, get the 3% more spell damage per power charge, and have your maximum to power charges applied to your maximum to frenzies. You never need to gain them, and you always count as being at maximum. So if you have 8 power charges, which is very realistic, in fact 9 is super realistic and achievable, 3 base, 3 from tree, 3 from items, not only do you get 27% more spell damage, but you effectively get 9 frenzy charges. And this can be taken to an even crazier level, using the belts off of Maven. Olessa's Delight, Graven's Secret, and Arn's Anguish replace normal charges with their special variants. So Arn's Anguish replaces your endurance charges with brutal charges. Any chance that you would have to gain or to maximum endurance charges is now applied to brutal charges instead, which normally means you can either be super tanky and have endurance charges, or get a ton of triple damage with brutal charges. This is where Ralakesh's gets really cool, because it says, why not both? See, you count as being at your maximum number of endurance charges, but Ralakesh's doesn't say count as being at your maximum number of brutal charges. And it doesn't say that your maximum brutal charges replaces your max endurance. It just says that your chance to gain brutal charges replaces your chance to gain endurance charges. So if you would have 10 endurance charges, with Ralakesh's, you can now have 10 endurance charges and 10 brutal charges. This makes these belts incredibly powerful because for the low cost of your boots, you're able to double dip. Or maybe you could double dip in another way and triple dip or quadruple dip and end up scaling all of your charges by stacking max power. This is why, while we have seen Ralakesh's Impatience applied to a wide range of builds, most commonly they're on charge stacking ascendancies. Things like a Raider who can get +1 Frenzy, or a Slayer who can get +1 Frenzy and apply Frenzy to Endurance, or an Occultist wearing Badge of a Brotherhood who can get +1 max power and then apply those power charges to Frenzy. Double dipping in this way, or triple dipping if you're using one of the belts, is a great way to get a lot of extra value. The only thing I would caution is there can be too much of a good thing. Because as potent as these bonuses are, if you don't have any way to capitalize off of them, then you probably won't get all that much damage from it. After all, 200% increased critical strike chance is nice and all, but you need enough base crit to actually deal those crits, and then you need crit damage to power it. Luckily, there's a lot of stats that do synergize. For example, the Surge Binder gloves and Will Clash helmet give you increases to damage per charge, as does the Void Battery weapon, but I think that one's pretty well known. Similarly, there's a synthesized and essence modifier for flat damage per charge. You can also find that on Precursor's emblems. So charge stacking is now a way to get base damage for your skills as well. And if you don't want to use a Void Battery, you could always use a Tullfall that gives a massive amount of cold damage to spells per power charge. Sure, you gain a frenzy upon reaching max power and lose all power, but remember, gaining and losing don't matter here. All that matters is that you count as being at maximum. So this is another way to scale your damage in a massive way, and one that I think hasn't been explored enough. So maybe stay tuned for a future video talking about Tullfall. These are just a few of the cool things that Ralakesh enables. Now, I don't know if the boots are going to stay in their current form long term. They're incredibly powerful and relatively common. Is that just because pretty much everyone's magic finding in every map in 3.23? Or is it because they're a little bit overtuned? Are skills like Penance Brand of Dissipation completely carrying it? Or is it just genuinely solid and worth putting in a wide variety of setups? I can't answer all of these questions, but to the last one, I would say while there are some outlier skills, Ralakesh's is good in such a wide range of builds thus far that it is a strong item on its own. I don't know if that means there's a nerf in the future, it's going to get more rare, or maybe GGG decided this is fine and they'll adjust around its existence. And remember, while everything I just talked about is a great way to scale your damage, there's very few ways to get defenses per charge. There are a couple, but most of the defenses related to charges are triggered by being at the maximum number, which yes, Ralakesh enables, but because it doesn't stack per charge, the applications are limited, and it doesn't really care if you have 3 or 13. So when you're playing a charge stacking build, because of a high number of uniques they tend to use, you may find yourself on the squishy side, especially if you're playing it on a budget. But now I'm curious, have you played a charge stacker before? If so, what build and how has your experience been? Be sure to let me know down in the comments below. And if you want to know some more about other builds applying this cool tech, then check out the meta report where I went over them both on week 4 and week 2. Link to that will be up in the card and down below, or over at MaxwellGG where you can read all about it. With that said, I'd like to take a moment to give thanks to my patrons and channel members for their continued support. For as low as $1 a month, you can help make videos just like this one possible. The link to support is down below. With that said, thank you for watching to the end. That's all for me today. I hope you learned something. Good luck in your Ralakesh builds, and I'll see you again sometime soon.